We found them in a place that should not exist, a system without a star, a rogue planet drifting in the endless, cold dark. We called it Nocturne. It should have been a ball of frozen rock. Instead, it was a garden, a world teeming with soft, glowing life. And at its heart lived the Lumina. They were tall and slender. Their skin was the color of pearl. They moved with a grace that broke our soldiers' hearts. They did not have cities. They had groves. They did not have machines. They had life that served the same purpose. Everything on their world hummed with a quiet energy, a resonance we could feel in our bones. It was a song we could not hear, a perfect chord of existence. We had searched for life for 1,000 years. We found ruins. We found graves. We found monsters. But we never found this. Unbroken peace, a civilization that did not know strife. They had no word for war, no concept for hate, no understanding of fear. They were perfect, and we were about to ruin them. We had to. Because something was following us, something we had been running from for generations. A shadow was falling across the galaxy. It devoured stars and silenced worlds, and it was heading right for their perfect home. Our arrival was not a greeting. It was a death sentence. A shadow fell upon their perfect peace. Our ships were jagged knives in their soft sky. We were iron and fire and fury. They were light and harmony. We landed our shuttles in their glowing groves. Our armored boots crushed phosphorescent flora. The air, once clean and sweet, now tasted of our engine exhaust. We were a poison in their veins. The Lumina did not flee. They gathered. They watched us with large, dark eyes. There was no fear in their gaze, only a deep and profound curiosity. It was almost worse than terror. It made us feel like vandals in a holy place. Our commanders met with their elders. The meeting took place under a canopy of living light. We tried to explain. We used universal translators. We showed them star charts of the enemy's path. We showed them data from 100 dead worlds. We spoke of the swarm, a hive mind of biological horrors, a locust plague that stripped galaxies bare. We told them their world was next. They listened patiently. They tilted their elegant heads. When we finished, they communicated. Not with words, but with a feeling. A projection of pure confusion. The concept would not fit into their minds. It was like trying to describe color to a man born blind. An enemy. A being that exists only to destroy. It was a lie to them. A logical impossibility in a universe of interconnected life. We had to show them. And the only way to show them was pain. The first lesson is pain. They did not understand our words for enemy. They could not grasp a will devoted to unmaking. For them, every being was part of the great song. Even a dissonant note had its place. We argued with them for days. Our desperation grew with every passing moment. The swarm was coming. It did not debate. It did not negotiate. It only consumed. We had to break their perfect world to save it. Our commander gave the order. A single shot from our orbiting destroyer. It was aimed at a barren moon that circled their planet, a lifeless rock they used for stargazing. We told them to watch the sky. We told them this was what the enemy does, not to a moon, but to a world, to them. The lance of light struck the moon. It cracked like an egg. The explosion was silent in the void. But it was brilliant, a new and terrible star in their sky. We expected them to finally understand, to feel the cold dread we felt every day. But their reaction was not what we predicted. They did not cry out in fear. They wept. They produced a sound, a low, mournful chord. It echoed through the groves and across the plains. They were not mourning the rock. They were mourning the action itself. The choice to destroy. The introduction of a final, ugly end into their reality. They felt the pain of our choice, the pain of our own fallen nature. In that moment, we did not teach them about the enemy. We became the enemy. So we showed them what it meant to lose, by losing a part of ourselves. We began forging new gods of war. There was no more time for debate. Their grief was a luxury we could not afford. The swarm would be here in months. We brought down the forges from our ships, massive mobile fabricators that bellowed smoke and fire. They were a scar upon the Lumina's landscape. We started to build an army. We gave them armor, plates of shimmering alloy, molded to their slender frames. It was light but stronger than any material they knew. It felt like a cage to them. We gave them weapons of light, rifles that fired focused energy beams. They were elegant tools of destruction. Their gentle hands, hands that had only ever created, learned to make a fist. We watched them struggle to hold the weapons. It was like watching a child hold a scorpion. Our sergeants, men and women hardened by 100 battles, became their teachers. The first lessons were simple: how to stand, how to aim, how to fire. The Lumina were fast learners. Their movements were fluid. Their focus was absolute. But they lacked the one thing every soldier needs: intent. They fired at targets, but they did not wish to hit them. It was a dance, not a drill. We had to change their minds. We had to instill the will to fight. We created combat simulations, holographic projections of the swarm, monstrous creatures of claw and fang. We put the Lumina inside these nightmares, and for the first time, we saw a flicker of something new in their eyes. Not anger, not yet, but the dawning horror of what was coming. The garden was being paved over. In its place, we built an arsenal. We taught them the symphony of destruction. It began with tactics and the logic of battle. We showed them how to move as a squad, how to provide cover fire, how to flank an enemy. They learned the brutal geometry of combat, the angles of attack and the fields of fire. Their natural harmony made them excellent soldiers. They moved together without words, a silent, deadly ballet. We taught them strategy, how to read a battlefield, how to sacrifice a pawn to save a queen. This was the hardest lesson, the cold math of acceptable losses. To their minds, no loss was acceptable. Every life was a unique and sacred note in the song. To willingly sacrifice one, it was an act of cosmic vandalism. Our commander put it bluntly: you can lose a finger, or you can lose the whole hand. They resisted this idea. They would break formation to save a single comrade. They would risk an entire unit for one fallen soldier. It was noble. It was beautiful. And it was going to get them all killed. We had to be cruel. We ran simulations where their compassion led to total annihilation, over and over. We forced them to watch their sentimentality fail them. We showed them their kindness was a weapon the enemy would use against them. Slowly, painfully, they began to change. They learned to hold the line. They learned to let a comrade fall so that others might live. Each time they did, a little of their light went out. The symphony we taught them was a funeral dirge. Its notes were laser fire. Its rhythm was marching feet. And its crescendo was the silence of the dead. They were becoming us. Together, we won our first battle. It was not a simulation. A swarm scout fleet dropped into the system's edge. They were faster than we had predicted. 3 hunter-killer vessels, sleek, organic ships that moved like predators. They came to survey the system for the main fleet. They could not be allowed to report back. Our fleet was small, outnumbered. But we had a new advantage: the Lumina. We met them in the void. Our iron ships flew alongside their newly built fighters. The Lumina craft were things of beauty. Deadly, but with an elegance we could never design. The battle was short and brutal. The swarm fought with mindless ferocity. They threw themselves at us, expecting us to break. They had never fought anyone like the Lumina. The Lumina pilots did not just fly. They danced. They moved with an intuition that defied our combat computers. They weaved through enemy fire. Their energy weapons sliced through the swarm's bioarmor. We supported them with our heavy cruisers, laying down fields of fire, creating openings for them to exploit. We were the hammer. They were the scalpel. We shattered the scout fleet. Not a single enemy ship escaped. A cheer went up on the bridge of our flagship. We had done it. We had given them a fighting chance. We celebrated our victory. But when we opened a channel to the Lumina commander, there was no celebration. We saw only sorrow in their eyes. They were mourning. They mourned the enemy they had destroyed. They mourned the necessity of the act. We had won the battle. But our victory tasted of ash. We had taught them to kill, and they were grieving for their own lost innocence. The scars of the student became our own. In the years that followed, the war began in earnest. The main swarm fleet arrived, a tide of gnashing teeth and razor claws. It was a war on a scale we had never seen. But the Lumina were ready. They were no longer the gentle gardeners we had found. They had become warriors of terrible skill. They fought with a cold and focused grace, a chilling efficiency that even our most veteran soldiers admired. We watched them change. Their skin, once like pearl, took on the hardness of porcelain. Their large, curious eyes became narrow and watchful. They still moved with grace. But now, it was the grace of a predator. The song of their world had changed. The soft, harmonious chords were gone, replaced by a driving, martial rhythm, a beat that pulsed with war. They were magnificent, and they were terrifying. We saw our own reflection in their hardened eyes. We had wanted to give them a shield. Instead, we had handed them a sword, and they had mastered it. They developed their own strategies, tactics that were fluid, unpredictable, and devastatingly effective. They learned to think like the swarm, to anticipate its mindless hunger. They became the perfect counter to the enemy. We had created the ultimate weapon, a race of warrior artists. But we had also destroyed something precious, something we could never get back. We would sometimes see them in their rare moments of quiet, standing in their damaged groves, looking at the sky with an emptiness we recognized. It was the look of a soldier who has seen too much, the look we saw in the mirror every day. Our students had learned their lessons too well, and we, the teachers, were beginning to feel a deep unease. We had saved them from the swarm, but who would save them from us? The abyss stared back. We thought we were teaching the Lumina how to fight our war. But the swarm was a student too. It was not just a mindless beast. It was a collective intelligence. And it was learning. It had fought 1,000 races across the galaxy. It learned from every victory and every defeat. And now, it was learning from us. Our strategies, once so effective, began to fail. Ambushes we set were avoided. Weak points we targeted were suddenly reinforced. The swarm started to use our own tactics against us. It learned to flank. It learned to feign retreat. It learned to concentrate its firepower. It was like fighting a monstrous mirror of ourselves. The war became a grinding, brutal stalemate. For every system we reclaimed, we lost two more. The swarm's numbers were endless. It bred new horrors in the blackness between stars. Ships and soldiers grown from stolen biomass. Every defeat only made it stronger. It adapted faster than we could innovate. Our rigid, hierarchical command structure was too slow. Our logic was too predictable. We were fighting an enemy that had become our shadow. The breaking point came in the siege of the binary stars. It was meant to be our decisive victory. A massive joint operation, the bulk of our human fleet and the Lumina's finest warriors. We would crush the swarm's regional command ship. We would cut the head off the snake. It was a good plan, a logical plan, and it led us directly into the greatest trap in military history. The abyss we had been staring into. It had our eyes. Our fleets shattered and our fortresses fell. The battle was a catastrophe. The swarm knew we were coming. It had anticipated our every move. It turned our own strategy against us with horrifying precision. The battle was over before it had truly begun. Our proud warships were torn apart. Our fortresses, orbital bastions we thought were invincible, were cracked open like nuts. The war we had so proudly created was a war we could not win. We limped away from the battle. Our fleet was a ghost of its former self. We had lost more than ships and soldiers. We had lost our certainty, our belief in our own power. For the first time, we tasted true despair. We had faced extinction before, but we had always fought back. We had always believed we could win. Now, we knew we could not. The swarm was too vast, too adaptable, too relentless. We retreated back to Nocturne, the last bastion of hope in a dying galaxy. We prepared for the end. We would make our final stand here. We would sell our lives dearly. We would go down fighting, as was our way. We had taught the Lumina how to fight, how to endure, how to die for a cause. We expected them to stand with us, to fight to the last breath. But they had one final lesson to teach, and it was nothing we could have ever imagined. The second lesson begins now, they told us. The Lumina gathered us in their central grove. The scars of war were all around us. Burned trees and shattered earth. Our remaining generals stood shoulder to shoulder with their commanders. We were defeated. We were broken. We were ready for our final orders. We expected a speech about courage, a call to a glorious last stand. Instead, the lead Lumina spoke a single, impossible word. Stop. They asked us to stop fighting, to power down our weapons, to silence our engines, to let the rage and fury of the war fall away. They proposed a new path, a new strategy we had never considered, an idea so alien to our nature that we first thought it was a mistranslation. They called it total surrender. We were stunned, horrified. Had they gone mad? Had the pressure of the war finally broken their spirit? Surrender to the swarm? Let those monsters overrun their world? Devour their people? It was unthinkable. It was a betrayal of everything we had fought for, every life we had lost. Our commander shouted at them. He accused them of cowardice. He told them we would fight alone if we had to. We would not dishonor our dead with surrender. The Lumina did not react to his anger. They simply stood there, radiating a calm that was more unsettling than any threat. They waited for our rage to burn itself out. Then their commander spoke again. His voice was not a sound, but a thought projected into our minds. A thought of perfect clarity. You misunderstand. The surrender is not to the enemy. It is to ourselves. an impossible request. We thought they meant to yield to the swarm. We saw it as the ultimate defeat, allowing the darkness to win, letting the song of their world be silenced forever. Our entire history, our very identity, was built on defiance. We fought tyrants. We fought monsters. We fought the cold, uncaring void itself. We never, ever surrendered. It was a word that meant death and dishonor, the Lumina explained. Their concept of surrender was not about submission. It was not about raising a white flag to the enemy. It was about the enemy within. They told us our drive to fight, our need to dominate, was the very thing fueling the swarm. We were locked in a cycle. Our aggression fed its aggression. Our violence fed its violence. We were two sides of the same destructive coin. The swarm did not just consume planets. It consumed rage. It consumed fear. We were its primary food source. They explained surrender was not about the enemy. It was an internal act. We had to surrender our fear of death. We had to surrender our anger at our losses. We had to surrender our pride, our desperate, clawing need to impose our will upon the universe. They asked us to lay down not just our weapons, but our warrior spirit itself. They believed this was the only way to break the cycle, the only way to starve the beast. It was the hardest thing they could have asked, harder than any battle, harder than facing 1,000 enemy ships. They asked us to become everything we were not, to be still, to be silent, to be receptive, to let go of the illusion of control. We had come to their world as teachers. Now, we were the students. And the lesson was to unlearn everything that made us human. We began the quiet armistice. With no other options left, we agreed. Our commander gave the order. Across our battered fleet, engines spun down. Weapon systems went cold. The hum of our technology was replaced by an unnerving silence. We had to learn how to be truly still. For a species like ours, a species of builders and fighters, the stillness was a kind of torture. It felt like giving up. It felt like dying. We sat in our silent ships, watching the swarms advance on our tactical displays. They were days away, then hours. We did nothing. No plans, no strategies, no desperate gambles. We just watched. The impulse to act was a physical itch, a scream building in our throats. Our training, our instincts, our very soul screamed at us to fight, to do something, anything. But we had given our word. The Lumina guided us. They did not command. They invited. They sent their wisest elders to our ships. They moved among our hardened soldiers. They did not speak. They just radiated a sense of profound peace, a quiet strength that slowly began to soothe our frantic minds. They showed us that stillness was not emptiness. It was a state of being full of awareness, full of potential. It was a battle fought within our own minds. The enemy was our own impatience, our own fear, our own doubt. We had to wrestle with the ghosts of our past, the call of our ancestors, the warrior pride that had defined us. We had to power down our rage. We had to silence our own inner turmoil. It was the hardest command we ever had to obey. The quiet armistice was the loudest war we ever fought. They taught us to surrender the self. This was the core of their lesson. It was not about collective suicide or pacifism. It was a discipline, a mental art form. The Lumina taught us to release our grip on fear. Fear was the engine of the swarm. Our fear of annihilation, our fear of pain, our fear of being forgotten. This fear made us predictable. It made us brittle. It made us fight in a way the swarm could understand and counter. We had to let go of the will to dominate. This was the root of our fear. the belief that we must control our environment to survive, the idea that we must conquer or be conquered. The Lumina called this the Great Lie. They believed the universe was not a battlefield. It was a symphony, and our desperate need for control was a screeching, ugly note that threw everything out of tune. The swarm was not an external evil. It was the physical manifestation of that ugly note, an echo of our own inner conflict. The process was slow. It involved long periods of meditation, of focusing inward, of confronting the parts of ourselves we kept hidden, our pride, our arrogance, our secret terror of the dark. We had to acknowledge these things, and then we had to let them go. We had to surrender the individual self, the ego that screamed, "I am," and replace it with a quieter, deeper truth. The truth that we are. For a soldier, the ego is a shield. It is the core of their courage. To surrender it felt like becoming vulnerable, becoming weak. But the Lumina showed us it was the opposite. By releasing the small, fearful self, we connected to something larger, something ancient and powerful. We were not emptying ourselves. We were opening ourselves up to the great, quiet song of the universe. The song their world had sung before we arrived. Our combined minds became a silent wave. As the swarm entered the system, we were ready. Not with guns, but with stillness. Humans and Lumina side by side. In the groves of Nocturne, on the bridges of our silent ships. We closed our eyes. We let go of the final vestiges of fear. And together, we reached for the song. We surrendered our individual consciousness. We merged into a single, unified state of being. It was not a weapon. It was a declaration, a broadcast, a wave of pure existence. It contained no anger, no hatred, no intent to harm. It was a psychic wave of absolute peace, of profound and unshakable tranquility. It was the feeling of a sunlit morning, the feeling of a sleeping child, the feeling of a perfect, harmonious chord held for eternity. It was a force the swarm could not comprehend. The wave washed over the system. It touched the leading edge of the swarm fleet. These monstrous, biological ships were built for war. They were shielded against every weapon we had. But they had no defense for this, because it was not an attack. It was an offering. The swarm's hive mind, a consciousness built on rage and hunger, suddenly encountered its opposite. A state of being without need, without desire, without conflict. Imagine a creature born in a hurricane, a being that knows only wind and noise and chaos. And then, for the first time, it experiences a moment of perfect calm. It does not know how to process it. The very foundation of its reality is shaken. The swarm's advance faltered. Its hive mind recoiled in confusion. It had met a logic it could not compute, a weapon it could not fight, a truth it could not consume. We did not win the war. We simply ended it. The swarm was not destroyed. It was changed. The psychic wave of pure being did not kill it. It healed it. It soothed the frantic, mindless hunger that drove it. The great, dissonant screech of the swarm's consciousness was quieted by the perfect harmony we offered. The hive mind, for the first time in its existence, felt peace, and it could not continue its war. The great fleet stopped. The monstrous ships hung silent in the void. Then slowly they turned. They did not flee in terror. They retreated with a strange, new grace. They moved away from Nocturne, away from our part of the galaxy. They went back into the deep dark from which they came, not as a defeated enemy, but as something new. Something that had been reminded of a forgotten possibility, the possibility of not fighting. We watched them go. We did not celebrate. We did not cheer. We simply stood in the quiet aftermath, human and Lumina together. We had not conquered the swarm. We had not proven our might. We had surrendered. And in that surrender, we found a strength we never knew we possessed. We learned that true victory is not about conquest. It is not about destroying your enemy. It is about transforming the conflict itself. We came to their world to teach them war. And in the end, they taught us how to truly win. By letting go